This is a book in silhouette. I'm in silhouette too. So, Brexit Bay 2029, or Brexit Bay by Michael Fitzallen. We're going on to the chapter 3. The third chapter. The three people go down to the seaside for a swim. Chapter 3. The sea, the ever free. By the time Adele arrived, Kate had gone back to work. She enjoyed lunch, so she said, but had to leave 5 minutes before 2 to walk back to the shop. That means 5 minutes before 2 to walk back to the shop. Pie was the only food on the menu. My beef pie had mushrooms, broccoli, carrot and cauliflower in it, and a forkful of beef. Her fish pie had leeks, carrots, diced cabbage, and shavings of a quarter of grated fish finger swimming in a white wine sauce, which was so peppery it tasted like grit. Eating out since BA Day had been interesting, to say the least. You must remember the celebrations of BA Day. Breakaway Day, 4th of July, 2020. 9 years later, people were talking about another Wall Street crash. The crash was in 1929, and we were heading for the 100th anniversary. And as far as the markets in America and the Far East were concerned, we were heading for a worse stock market crash ourselves in England. We caught up on our life stories. Her parents were together still, both working all hours to put bread on the table, she reckoned. And she would meet a local boy one day and settle down. Her parents lived in a cottage called Rover's Rest. She shared the irony. Her father was not one to rove anywhere but the local pub, and she had no desire to travel. She knew and liked the area. I had seen in the shop how she knew everyone. I was sad to say goodbye, but clutched the swimming trunks in my lap as I waited for the minute hand to click on to 2 o'clock. At the precise moment the clock moved to 1 minute past, she entered. I stood up and noticed freckly Freddy following her like an obedient puppy dog. I had sat at the table that had a bench seat built into a nook, and faced the door. I struggled up and around the table, almost tripping over one of the 2 stools on the other side. I was not sure what to do, so I held out my hand and she clasped it. Her hand felt cold and wet. I dived forward at the same time and kissed her quickly on both cheeks, and then planted a third kiss on her right cheek. Ah, a Polish greeting, the third kiss. We do not know each other that well yet, Aubrey, but a charming gesture nonetheless. She chastised me, smiling and meeting my eyes. My eyes stared into hers, one glass, one brown, and I felt, no, I wanted there to be love in her eyes. Cold hands and warm heart, I hope, I responded, summoning up my most suave voice. I've just loaded the Mazda with champers for our tea. I have cucumber sandwiches, tongue pate on toast, and Madeira cake. I see you have your swim shorts, she gushed, looking at the mass of sailcloth and canvas bunched up in my left hand. Don't worry about a towel, we have loads, thick Egyptian cotton, not flimsy beach towels. I wanted to introduce you to my boyfriend, Freddie Lawless. I believe you have already met. Pleased to meet you, he blurted out just as I spoke. Indeed, I said, meaning indeed we had met before, but it sounded as if I was saying indeed it was a pleasure for him to meet me. I see, he sighed, not sure how to take my remark, and frowning in confusion. I had to recover quickly. The pleasure, I assure you, is all mine. I had no idea who you were last night, and it was my way of letting your dad know I was in town. I hope it won't have an effect on our relationship on this afternoon. I know how it works, Freddie soothed, smiling at me with the same disarming and charming smile that was his father's trademark. Our eyes locked, our smiles were locked. We looked like rigor mortis had set in on our faces. The incident is forgotten about. Don't worry. He stuck out his hand, watched by Adele. I took it and immediately regretted my foolishness. He gripped my hand like a viper, swallowing an egg. I guessed he was investing all his hatred into his vice-like clasp. Pleased to meet you. I'm glad there are no hard feelings, I managed to breathe as I felt my hand being crushed. I had intended to give him a firm grip, the sign of a strong person, but his grip was far superior, and I had not noticed the big boy's bulk when I had humiliated him last night. This guy had the body of a protein-drinking gym bunny who spends 4 hours in the gym 7 days a week. The pain he was inflicting made me wince, and fortunately Adele noticed. You can let go of poor Aubrey. Swimming is such a bore with one arm in a sling, purred Adele, smiling at first at Orbs. Sorry. At me, broadly at me. Maybe she did like me more than Freddie. Like an obedient gun dog dropping a dead pheasant at its master's command, he let go his vice-like grip. It was the most frightening thing I could imagine, a woman who could control a killing machine with one command. He was her Rottweiler. I shivered before deciding that going for a swim was a bad idea. All that expanse of water to drown in. If Adele did me in, she would pocket my commission. The payment for the goods and my commission for doing the deal were two separate transfers. I had only seen the transaction for the silver ingots, not for my cut of the deal. I've been working too hard and too long with crooks. It was beginning to rub off on me. I used to boast I know every crook and nanny in town. I mean, every nook and cranny in town. It had all got too much for me. I was suspicious of even this beautiful girl who had struggled to save her daughter and lost her eye for her trouble. You've gone pale. Are you okay? Adele asked with such concern and conviction that all my suspicions disappeared. It might be the beef and the pie, I offered, just as the landlord arrived with a tray with 3 glasses half filled with champagne. His terse expression showed that he had heard the remark. He was not happy, but he hid it for Adele's sake. I was beginning to see a pattern. Everyone seemed to be obsessed by Adele, but it was not clear which of us she was most fond of, out of the men she knew. I willed it to be me, but she seemed equally happy talking to anyone. A flute of champagne for Adele and her guest, he announced, smiling at her. Compliments of the management, and on the insistence of Mr. Lawless himself. Fred and I were clearly not the only people in town who were in love with this one-eyed Polish beauty. He almost devoured poor Adele with his eyes, the dirty dog. There was a lot of competition for her attention, but the more I learnt about Terence Lawless and his generosity, the more I liked him. Thank you, Sam, Adele purred, taking hold of the glass and holding it up to the window, the only source of light in that dingy snug bar. Torje George. Good health, Tom echoed, unintentionally translating for me. Sláinte, I countered. Cheers, Freddie added. All thoughts now centred on the afternoon to come. It was going to be the best one of my life. I was going to be spending time with the first woman I had ever loved, and Freddie would be too busy showing off his swimming skills to stop me putting my arms around Adele and kissing her, not on the cheek, but on the lips. Cheers, cried Freddie, boorishly loudly, before knocking the glass back. Did he not realise champagne needs to be sipped and savoured, especially a Grand Cru champagne like Barneau Grand Reserve Brut Grand Cru Bousy? I knew what it was. I had seen the bottle on the bar counter. I was an observant and vigilant salesman. This was a high life. I was taking it all in. We sipped our champagne, Adele and I, our eyes meeting over the rim of our champagne flutes. It was as if Freddie was not there. It only lasted for a moment, a glance between two star-crossed lovers. No one noticed our furtive flirting. It was our secret coup de foudre. That might have been due to the fact that the landlord, Sam Taylor, was talking about his band and trying to convince Freddie to play bass guitar at his next gig. Freddie knocked back his glass, and Adele, showing him favour, topped up his glass. I filled my glass as she listened to the two of them chatting away. I needed the alcohol for Dutch courage. I was going to have to tell Adele how I felt about her. I was convinced more than ever that I was in love with Adele. My heart ached, and the way she looked at me convinced me she had feelings for me. I had been told that love conquers all. I had been told Santa Claus brought my bike and delivered it down the chimney. I'm playing at the Westloo barn dance, bragged Freddie, as Sam slipped away, pleased now that he had a guitarist. That's wonderful, Freddie, crooned Adele. She sounded like a mother telling everyone her daughter had taken its first steps. Sometimes I hated the way she spoke to Freddie, like he was the only one. I think he felt the same way about me. I loved her, so I did not care. Well done, Freddie, I added, sounding as genuine as I could. It was a miracle he had the discipline to play, let alone be part of a headline band. I quickly reminded myself that bitterness was colouring my judgment of him. Anyone who got as fit as he had definitely needed serious discipline. His arm muscles were as thick as bull's thighs. Luckily for me, he was so busy basking in his own success, he let down his guard, allowing me to move closer to the girl I loved. We'd better get going, Adele decided, draining her glass. Freddie was too slow. He was walking towards the bar to ask Sam about the gig. He'd obviously just thought of something, so I slipped in right behind her and headed for the door, making poor Freddie follow on behind like the obedient hound dog he was. Outside, the sunshine was almost blinding. The Bembo had the type of dark and dingy snug bar designed for cold winter's nights. I took a while to adjust my eyesight to the bright light, but before me were two beautiful sights. Adele, who shrugged herself out of her linen blazer, revealing a red t-shirt and a superb dark green Maserati Quattroporta glinting in the sun. She had not locked it. Lawless would not have tolerated theft. The number plate was LL27MQP, only 2 years old. How they had smuggled it into England, I could not guess. Lawless made things happen. Even though I was smarting the sun, I had the presence of mind to jump into the passenger seat, so I would be next to the gorgeous driver and could admire her by glancing across and taking in her profile. Feeling smug, I settled into the leather seat. The car smelt of luxury and Adele's perfume. Adele opened the driver's door as I pushed the button to open my window. You can drive, Freddie, she said, waiting for Freddie to walk around the back of the car and sit in the driver's seat. She shut the door for him. What was this guy? I wondered. A prince? For goodness sake, he smiled over at me, pressing the button to start the motor. I suddenly realised how rude I had been. I should have been gallant and opened the pub door for her, or the car door for her, one or the other. I wanted to leap out and open the door for Adele, but I heard the clunk of her door closing before I could speak. Infuriatingly, Freddie was handsome, hunky, and an extremely competent driver. I would say expert. He turned the car round in the narrow street in only 4 movements and guided the car through the town using just the right amount of assertion and respect for other drivers and pedestrians. Despite myself, I was beginning to like him, which only served to make me love Adele more. I knew it did not make sense, but the fact that he found Adele desirable made me desire her even more. The warm breeze ruffled my hair, so I closed my window just as Freddie opened up the throttle and gunned the car into the first bend on the road. It was like being in a rally car. I had to admit he was a superb driver. Despite my hatred of his type, hatred of his grip on Adele, and hatred of his charm, I had to give him credit where credit was due. I love it when Freddie drives, announced Adele. Every positive comment about him was another arrow in my heart. I was determined to have the best afternoon ever, and it would be. Where did you learn to drive? I asked, surprised at my admiration, as we powered out of a bend and he set up the car for the next. Italy. My mother is from Lugano in the mountains near Monza. She had me coached by a few racing drivers. I picked up a few tips on technique. Faster, Freddie, faster, cried Adele. They had a conversation in Polish for the next few bends. Freddie kept to a swift but sure pace. It ended with Freddie insisting that he would not give in. I knew that, not because I speak Polish, I didn't, but because Adele called him a spoilsport in English and laughed. So you're half Irish and I'm half Italian, Freddie continued. Actually, both my parents are Irish. My father went out to Hong Kong and was never heard of again. So you're an orphan then? My mother's in Ireland, but I guess you're right. Technically, here I am. An orphan, I admitted, and I had never really thought about that. What about you? My mother was deported in the second wave. I guess your mother was in the third wave with the Commonwealth. They should have deported Dad. He paused to allow me to be subtly impressed. The silence weighed heavily on the conversation. I felt obliged to fill the void by speaking. Really? How so? I asked. He's actually originally Swedish. He should have gone in the second, but he had bought his British passport, and entrepreneurs worth more than 5 million were exempt. The first wave had been the Muslims, the second wave had been the Europeans, and the third wave had been Commonwealth and Irish from either the Republic or the North. That stunned me. I had them both pegged as two racist money grabbers who supported the reparation of nationals. The opposite was true. Here were two Europeans who had used the opportunities provided by Brexit to build a big business, not the fascist, jingoistic thieves that I had been brainwashed by the tabloid newspapers to expect, and who I assumed they were. I was learning on the job. Do not believe what you read in the papers, and never judge a book by its cover. I'm the only other deviant that Terence could manage to save. He insisted it was vital to his business, piped up Adele from the back. All my preconceived ideas about the family and the firm were rapidly unravelling. How many times had my boss said, never make assumptions? So you haven't seen your mum for years, I continued, wanting to know more about Freddie all of a sudden. I felt a bit sorry for him. He had no mother while he was growing up. She was an outcast who he saw once a year. Poor Freddie. He was also having to fill his father's shoes. His life was not easy. I know you cannot get to see anyone in Ireland, and I know how you feel, he said as we climbed a steep hill, the engine roaring as it complained about having to work harder. Well, at least I grew up with her in the house. True, I hate Mum being in Italy, but I'm very lucky as I get to see my mother for 2 weeks at Christmas. My father puts me on the freighter to Gibraltar. The journey to Gib can be rough, especially in the Bay of Biscay. Really? Absolutely, it can be horrendous, and it takes forever. Why? I asked, not knowing why I was so suddenly interested in Freddie's journey to reunite with his mother. The waves throw the boat about a bit, like it's a toy, even on the calmest days, and I'm talking about a Panamax, with a dead weight of 52,000 tonnes. I can fly to Italy from Malaga via the Toulouse hub. The latest Airbus is amazing, small, quiet and comfortable. The Europeans have made real efforts to improve air travel, especially connecting European small cities using light and economical planes. Freddie brought me back a delicious cassoulet from Toulouse after Christmas, Adele simpered from her seat in the back. I looked in the rear-view mirror, but all I could see was the back window, naturally. Freddie had the rear-view mirror angled to see her for his pleasure. I noticed he looked in the mirror in rotation, every 2 minutes. Rear view, passenger door, driver door. Only professional drivers do that. I haven't been in a plane since I was a toddler, I sighed. All passenger airports in England had closed. They needed the runways to transport humanitarian aid to the north and other commercial and military flights. All the airports in the United Kingdom had been partially turned over to freight companies like DHL and FedEx, who made a fortune by importing food to the island, partially turned over to the military. Aid helicopters that provided succour to the poor, or helicopter gunships and fighter jets belonging to the Royal Air Force that kept order. Food was either sold to rich at inflated prices by unscrupulous merchants or distributed to poor, depending on the type of food it was. Bags of American and Vietnamese rice went north. Food aid, tins of caviar went south. They were delivered onto the merchants who stocked high-value foods for the very rich clients. Due to pollution scares and the cost of aviation fuel, all air travel had been discouraged by all governments around the world, hiking up the cost of airport tax. Only the richest 1% of the population could afford flights. It had returned to an exclusive club, just like the start of air travel. I was feeling more and more depressed. I had once seen a picture of Saint Sebastian in a church. The expression on his face and the pain he felt after being hit by all those arrows must have been etched onto his face. My heart looked like a porcupine with all the barbs shot into it from Adele and Freddie every time they said something nice about each other. Suddenly, I realised we had stopped. It was not the only thing I realised. Adele was betrothed to Freddie, as surely as a medieval princess. He was a prince, a knight in shining motor. I was somewhere between a stable boy and a servant at the king's dinner table. The whole charade was a charm offensive by the royal family, in order for me to feel even worse about my behaviour on my arrival. It was then clear to me that they wanted to do business with me again. Silver ingots were the only secure and portable trading item. It was necessary to build up a relationship with me. I was being oversensitive, I knew that, but I was beginning to realise that people in love do not act rationally. I did not feel like swimming, but it would not have been rude not to accept their hospitality. Despite myself, I was growing fonder and fonder of both of them. With a heavy heart, I undid my seatbelt. Freddie would steal the love of my life from under my nose, and I would be best man, in love with the bride for the rest of my life. I could see it all coming. You boys go ahead and bond in the water. I'll set up the picnic. The towels are in the boot, Orbs, Adele said. She was heading towards the boot. I was beside her in a flash this time. I managed to open the boot for her, and she thanked me for it. There was a wicker hamper in the back, a light blue woman's swimsuit lying on top of 3 fluffy white towels, and a spare wheel. Freddie joined us and palmed the key into Adele's hand. Thanks for letting me drive, he breathed. He was indecently close to her, and I hated it. He stood behind her, his body almost brushing hers. His breath was on her neck. My heart thumped as I realised that he was about to kiss her. A pleasure, but I'm driving back, Adele insisted firmly. She spun away from him, turning towards me, smiling shyly, looking at me lovingly, and whisking the swimsuit off the pile of towels. A wave of relief swept over my body. She still loved me. It was as if she was telling me that her circumstances were ruling her, and that if her circumstances had been different, I would have stood a chance. She was letting me know that although we were like ships that pass in the night, she would love me and remember me forever. I was suddenly incredibly happy. I'm going to change in the back of the car. You coming, or do you want to wait until I'm out? Freddie announced, jumping in the back and closing the door. I'll wait, I replied, grabbing one of the towels. He was talking to me. I'm just coming, she said, swinging her swimsuit, opening the door and joining him in the back. The boot lid hid them both, but I suppose they would not be shy when becoming naked. People with good bodies seldom are, and the other 2 towels that would have hidden them were still in the boot. Idly I had opened the hamper. 2 bottles of the same champagne from the pub lay on either side of the food. There were proper plates made of china strapped to the roof. Cutlery was similarly suspended from the lid. Nestled in the blue gingham napkins were 4 wooden boxes, and 3 different types of bread rolls were packed in paper bags, as if they had just come from the baker. I wondered what delicacies awaited us in the boxes. My stomach was begging for good food. I was not hungry, but I was not full either after my meagre pub lunch. As I closed the lid, I heard the 2 back doors clunk shut. They were ready for the waves. I threw the towel over my shoulder and returned to the car to fetch my swimsuit from the side pocket in the front passenger door. I changed while they raced down to the water. By the time I had caught up with them, they were splashing around in the water like children on holiday. I could never do anything like that on a normal work day. The breeze was warm, but the tarmac on the ground was still cold. There was a stone apron, and it was painful to walk across. Perhaps you had to jump it. Anyhow, the path was sandy and not too gravelly. The sand was moist and cold too, a foretaste of the water. I knew it would be freezing. I had been dragged into the water enough times by friends on holiday in Ireland to know 2 things. 1. The water surrounding the British Isles is freezing no matter whether it is in Dublin Bay, Canberra Sands or the Bristol Channel. And 2. People who live near the sea never feel the cold. There they were, swimming around as if they were in a heated pre-Brexit leisure centre where the water legally had to be 29 degrees. Leisure pools have since closed, cutbacks of course. Not that we could afford to heat the water nowadays with the energy crisis. Come on in, cried Adele encouragingly. My heart melted at her voice. I could refuse this woman nothing. I was her slave. I had not yet seen her in her swimsuit. All I could see were her tanned arms waving. The mystery of her tan had been solved. If she was out here all summer, she would go brown. I was reminded that St. Sebastian was a patron saint of athletes, and these 2 were good-looking, athletic, and clearly were like brother and sister. I was searching for a soulmate. Unfortunately, they had found theirs. What's it like? I asked, as if I didn't know. The soles of my flat feet were traipsing over the wet sand, and they did not like the icy feel of it at all. Great. At first it's a bit cold, called Freddie. I knew what he meant by a bit cold. Icebergs were a bit cold in his book. Why is it that the British are famed for their understatements? Freddie was the master. Maybe being educated in England counted for being British. I walked over the cold, wet sand towards the water, which I reckoned would be both those things. When I crossed the line, where the sea was lapping on the brown sand, my toes curled as the water rushed between them. It felt like someone had inserted ice cubes between my toes as some sort of sick practical joke, but I kept on walking. The next wave washed over my feet, and I felt them go numb, but still I walked on. The third wave engulfed my calves and splashed my kneecaps, but still I walked on. Each new wave shocked another part of my body. I gasped, but still I walked on. Maybe I should have run in, but I was not brave enough for that, and my heart, that kept stopping at each outrageous, freezing drenching, would never have thanked me for it. Arrows, melting, and ice, my heart was already thumping in my chest at the shoddy treatment it had received thus far. There was no alternative but to take the plunge. My crown jewels were next to be cryogenically assaulted, and I wanted to get that pain over and done with as soon as possible. I have never learnt to dive, so I performed a pastiche of a swan dive. Arms outstretched, I launched myself into the English Channel and into its icy grip. I sank like a stone, my body enveloped in the fluid, so cold that it should have carried a health warning. Had I spotted red flags up as I entered the water? I wondered. I did not even know where the nearest lifeguard station was. We had the beach to ourselves, the car park was empty. All these thoughts flooded my head as I came to terms with being doused. Now I can see why the beach was deserted, I noted, surfacing. Salt stung my eyes as I shook the sea from my hair, treading water to enable me to keep my head above the surface. I was still 6 foot away from my favourite couple, which necessitated raising my voice. I was still feeling the cold, and my voice went up an octave. I must have sounded like a schoolgirl. Don't worry, in half an hour the car park will be packed and the beach crowded in about 15 minutes. It's Poets' Day today, Adele assured me as she swam towards me, Freddie matching her stroke for stroke like her bodyguard, which I guess he was in many ways. He was certainly guarding her from me. 15 minutes and I'll be as frozen as a fish finger, I joked. And joy of joys, they both laughed. My new best friends. What's Poets' Day? Pop off early, tomorrow's Saturday, Freddie explained. You've never heard that expression? My boss has. Walt days. Work at all times. They laughed again. I was their clown. Momentarily, I was the happiest person on the planet. I even joined in their splashing of each other and swam around a bit. Their bay etiquette was spasmodic splashing, followed by swimming around in circles and starting the splashing again. Mine was flicking water and floundering around in a circle. They swam like professionals, performing the Australian crawl in slow, languid movements. I could only do breaststroke, and when particularly high waves lifted me up, I resorted to the safety of doggy paddle when I was sure that they were immersed in their swimming. When I finally thought about clowns, I remembered my mother's music. One song's lyrics said, "The tears of a clown when no one's around." My emotions were up and down like a yo-yo. If this was love, I did not think much of it. Ecstatic one minute, morose the next. I shook off all the negative thoughts, determined to spend the last few hours in Cornwall enjoying myself with my new friends. I would deal with my heart another time. Thankfully, splashing each other lasted only a few minutes. Adele was the first to leave the water. I tried to watch as she emerged from the sea, but Freddie was talking to me, and it would have been rude to turn my head and look at someone behind me. Are you having fun? He asked, swimming towards me. Yeah, but the water's so very cold, I replied, treading water. I'll do a few more minutes. You go in. I'll do a few strokes with you if you like. I think I might go in myself. I'm feeling a bit woozy all of a sudden. So am I. I thought it was the cold. You make me laugh. That's good. Have your legs gone numb? He asked. No, I just feel a bit sleepy, I said. Let's go back. I feel like I've been drugged. Ha! Your body's closing down with hypothermia. I told you it was cold. No, I've been drugged before. You're kidding. No, I'm not. Help me get to shore. How? Please, just do it. My arms are going numb now. Okay, help me, I'm going under. I swam towards him, confused. It was incredible. A strong, athletic youth was losing consciousness. He was not fighting to stay on the surface. He was letting the water swallow him up. I snapped out of my daze. His head slipped under the water. I had to do something. I grabbed for him. His arms were slippery. I tried to get a grip on his shoulders, but he sank further. I dove under the water and grabbed his biceps, lifting him up as best I could. Kicking wildly, we broke the surface. Help me, he whispered. I had a chance. He had not swallowed any water. He was so heavy and I was feeling weaker and weaker. Help me, Freddie, begged. Help me, Freddie, I begged. Kick your legs. I can't, he sighed. Adele. She's on shore. He was lucid for the time being, but he was falling in and out of consciousness. Adele! I shouted, turning around. I could not see her on the beach. Freddie's head lolled forward and into the sea. I pulled his face out of the water, pulling his head up by his hair. He did not so much as wince. Freddie, you're too heavy. Wake up. I need your help. I screamed in his ear. No response. I pushed my nails into his arms. No response. I need his leg. No response. Willing myself to be stronger, I pulled Freddie towards the beach. We were too far out for me to touch the bottom. He was under the water. I had to get his head above the surface. Why had we followed Adele so far out? I was not a strong swimmer at the best of times. I should have told her. I thought I had to in conversations before the meeting. Come on, Freddie, I hissed impatiently as I brought his head above water again. I supported the back of his head, keeping his nose and mouth above the surface. A huge wave lifted me up. I lost my grip and water gushed over Freddie's head. He choked and came around, shaking his head slightly, trying to get the sea out of his ears. I thought we could make it, but his eyes were still closed. It was like he was asleep. I held his head and kicked for shore. Now I was feeling weak. His head was heavy and kicking was exhausting. I turned to shore, no sign of Adele, but there were people on the shore. Help, help, I shouted as loudly as I could. No response. Luckily a wave came and pushed us towards the shore. I let go of Freddie's head and started waving both arms while I was treading water. No response. I grabbed Freddie's head. Another wave came and pushed us towards the shore. Hey! I screamed at the top of my lungs, reaching out for Freddie's head as the third wave came. No response. No Freddie. He was gone. The undercurrent in the last wave must have taken him under. I swam around in a circle, dived under the water and searched around. Nothing. No head, no body, no arms, and no legs. I was feeling weaker and weaker. I had to get myself to shore. I had to get help. Swimming as fast as my breaststroke allowed, I saw a crowd gathered at the shore. As I neared them, I heard raised voices. I heard cries for help. Are you okay? Asked a man dressed in a wetsuit, standing next to the surfboard. It's not Freddie, the woman announced. She was similarly dressed and similarly equipped. Where's Freddie? Adele asked, her voice slipping between the shoulders of the surfers as she arrived. She slipped between them so that I was facing her. She was searching my face for answers. I lost him. No, she cried, stepping around me. She ran into the water. She had dressed and the water lapped over her beige trousers, but she pushed on through the waves. As she waded in, her white shirt became transparent, clinging to her back, and then she was under the water and swimming out to sea. The surfers followed her. When they had reached a suitable depth, they crawled onto the surfboards and paddled out behind Adele. Adele duck-dived twice and swam on. She arrived at the exact position where I lost Freddie. It was uncanny that she had the sense to go to that spot. Was it female intuition? Diving down again, she surfaced and spoke to the surfers. I distinctly heard her asking them for help, yet they seemed not to have heard me. Like a magician, she pulled Freddie's head from the water, her hand resting under his chin. In a flurry of activity, the surfers slipped Freddie's body onto the nearest surfboard, kicking for shore. Adele took the far surfboard and slipped onto it, paddling behind. I was standing in the warm breeze, still frozen like an ice cube, helpless but relieved. I loved Adele even more at that moment. She was a heroine. I had missed the first aid course at school, but I felt sure she could perform mouth-to-mouth or CPR. She could bring Freddie back to life. As they neared the beach, I braved the frozen water again and tried to help, but they ignored me, all three of them. They had gone into rescue mode. The three of them manhandled him off the board and onto the soft sand of the beach above the waterline. Freddie looked white, like marble. His eyes were closed. He looked like he was asleep. Adele knelt down next to him and felt for a pulse. She bent down and put her ear to his chest. Then she shook her head. That was that. You killed him, the woman said. No, I was trying to save him, I argued. I heard him crying for help, she protested. That was me, I explained. You deliberately drowned him. We saw you, she insisted. Adele, you don't believe that, do you? I appealed to Adele. Freddie's dead, she sighed. That was the last words I heard from her that day, the day Freddie died. Murderer, cried the man, taking up his girlfriend's chant. He lunged at me, but even in my drowsy state, I was able to step back and out of his grasp. Adele was on her haunches, hunched over the body. The woman was trying to comfort her, while looking at me with daggers. The man was floundering in the sand. He would be on his feet, beating me to a pulp in a few seconds. Adrenaline kicked in, and I was off. I have never run so fast in my life. I could feel the man running after me, hearing him panting as he gained on me. Everyone was so damn fit. It was sickening. I pumped my arms and kicked my heels up, heading for the car. I was going to be accused of murder, and running around the country in swimming shorts was going to alert the police to my presence in any area. The boot was still open. The man was still gaining. He wasn't as tall as me. I had longer legs, but he was far, far fitter. Just as I reached the car, he put his hand on my shoulder. I slipped from his grasp, but he came at me again, gripping my shoulders so that I almost passed out with pain. I looked down into the boot, grabbed the bottle of champagne, and twisted my body. The swine did not let go, but I biffed him on the head with the bottle, which sent him flying and magically made him release his grip. He was lying right in my path, if I was going to reverse the Maserati out. Staggering to his feet, I lured him away from the car. He grabbed the bottle as I knew he would. I could see the bump already forming on his temple. He expected me to struggle, and I just gave it to him before kneeing him in the crotch. I raced to the car, threw open the door, jumped in and pushed the button. Nothing. The fob was missing. I had no idea how the man broke through the pain barrier, but he was at my shoulder again, and he grabbed the sore flesh and bruised muscle once more. I winced in pain and roared in frustration. I threw the door open and stepped on his toes, jabbing down hard. As he hopped on one leg, I opened the door fully, knocking him to the ground. If he could worry my shoulder, I could worry his crotch. As he tried to clamber to his feet, I planted another kick in his crotch. I think my kick had more power because I felt a squidgy mass on the end of my foot, and he curled into a fetal ball, groaning in pain. At the back of the car, I scoured the boot. The fob was lying in the hamper. Why, I could not tell. Returning to the driver's door, I checked that my assailant was still down. He had got to his knees, but was doubled in pain. I had time. I slipped into the driver's seat, started the car, reversed out of the parking space, avoiding their black car club Jaguar F-Pace, and headed for the border. I was leaving Poseidon Bay forever. As I turned onto the main road, I saw a Toyota Hilux pickup packed with Lawless's security men, armed to the teeth, speeding up the hill towards the point. They were coming for me. And that is the end of that chapter. So the next chapter is called Run, Run as Fast as You Can. Oh. Dear. Good. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. And we are hoping to get all the videos together in one place. So, until the next time.